Hello, well, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Yasmin Jafforni and I work for Salomon. And we're going to talk about something that we alluded to a little bit during the wonderful Reckitt presentation earlier on, and that's this whole idea of remote qual and engaging with the consumer, and sort of the inverse of that, and that was what we did 2 years ago and we all loved it, and that was sort of in-homes immersions and so on. So joining me on this panel, I have Oliver, Eva and Nadia, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So, Nadia?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Nadia and I'm leading research and insights in marketing science team for Europe at TikTok.
I'm Eva, and well done for pronouncing my surname. I always wonder how people pronounce the surname, so you did well. I work for HBO Max and kind of focus on SVOD research. Previously, I was at iPlayer at BBC and kind of always in that kind of space. And I'm looking forward to talking about the online research.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ollie. I am head of ethnography at Ipsos, but I'm speaking today from the AQR. The AQR is the Association for Qualitative Researchers, who are a membership organisation who try to champion the importance and wonders of qualitative research. So if you don't know about us, do look us up.
Right, so we've just had Bianca talk about the metaverse and lots of concepts which seem quite far away maybe from our day-to-day. So I'm going to start with a sort of an icebreaker, a very traditional qual thing, which I'm sure you've all seen, before we launch into the content. So Nadia, very quickly, mulled wine at a Christmas market or cocktail on a hot beach?
Christmas market.
Okay. Eva, Victoria Sponge or hot chocolate fudge cake?
Hot chocolate, anyway.
Okay. Ollie, living underwater or living in space?
Living underwater.
Okay.
Because I want to go to the beach and have a cocktail.
not hot chocolate. Oh.
Right, okay, so let's get to the core of the subject. Past 2 years haven't been easy engaging with consumers, as you all probably know. And I'm very interested in finding out from our panel what the challenges were over the past 2 years for you.
Shall I
Eva,
start?
yes.
Yeah, so I think before pandemic, online research wasn't anything new. We were doing it, we were trying it, we were experimenting with it. But I think no one a year and a half ago would have believed that if we said from tomorrow, all of your research will be online. I think no one thought that we could really pull it off, but I really think we have. I think we scrambled, we kind of organized ourselves, and we went on and started doing online all the time. And I think quite effectively, and I think a lot of the volume of results came back, and we were kind of saving costs on travel and everything, and thought, oh yeah, we got this, we're doing fine. Why did we ever even do the other way? But I think we have enough time now to stop, reflect and think. And I do think there are certain challenges that at least what I'm doing are something that will take a while to kind of go over. And from my point, maintaining creativity is one really big one. I think we are trying different methodologies, we're trying different approaches. But I still feel that, you cannot replace that body language, like even now us in the room and kind of chuckling to each other. And I think that the body language, the energy that you get in a room, it's really hard to replace. And I can't see that ever be fully achieved online and flat 2D. Another thing also, I think it's maintaining the relevance of qual. I think quant stayed the same, we just continue doing it as we have been, and it's quite easy, you just do it. Qual is the one that is hard work, that we need to think and we need to create and kind of be really engaging. And I do wonder to what extent we kind of are just letting it be something that color the quant rather than necessarily lead the hypothesis. And I'm not saying that's fully lost, absolutely I don't, but I do wonder if there is, I don't know, maybe 80% of the things that we are actually getting at the moment. And another thing is around maintaining enthusiasm. I think we are all getting, and I think that was mentioned earlier today as well, we are getting a little bit, fatigued from all of the Zoom calls and not being face to face. The, evenings are now opening up, so people would rather go out and do things face to face than stay and do the focus group necessarily online. And it's not even just fatigue from the point of the consumer, but also from the point of the stakeholders as well. I think that was mentioned earlier as well. It's really important that they're in a back room with us, and I think we are missing that as well if it's online.
Ollie, we're hearing words like fatigue and engagement and creativity. Would you agree with that?
Definitely, I would. The two words that I had written down for this were kind of engagement and trust. And if you want to be creative, you have to give a little bit more than you would normally. So you need trust. If you want engagement, then we've had some terrible stories around engagement in the last sort of 6 months or so, where people are rocking up to focus groups on their mobile phone, shockingly in one instance whilst driving as well. So clearly people are starting to participate in qualitative online sessions in ways that they just think they can fit it in. And that's problematic. You don't get engagement then, you can't build trust then, you can't have a decent conversation then. Although actually talking to people when they're driving is kind of interesting. So those are definitely big issues for us. I've got a slight bugbear that I wanted to sort of get out there, is that I think that so much of the new qualitative world of online talks about tools. And tools are really, really important because that's literally our form of engagement with them. But we need to move a little bit beyond tools. Like describing that we've got the right tool is a bit like saying we've got the right viewing facility. Yes, that's great, but how are you going to moderate? What are you going to ask? How are you going to engage people with these discussions? And I think that we need to move into the content a lot more of what is happening with a lot of our online research, rather than just saying we will engage them through a particular tool.
And Nadia, does that chime with you at all?
Yeah, I think what Ivor and Oliver highlighted fully resonates with my experience in the last 18 months with what we had when we had to face this on the digital environment. I think from my experience, what was the most missing is these in-context observations, opportunity to spend some time with consumers to see how they experience things, how they spend day, what kind of products they consume, how they're cooking their dinner, all these things. And then the opportunity to blend these observations with what consumers say. At the same time, I think what is strong is that, as I highlighted today in my keynote, we managed to scale up fast and easier. So digital tools definitely allowed us to conduct multi-stage, multi-market studies at a fast pace, bringing different consumer voices, bringing diverse opinions and blending them all together. So this is definitely a strength of digital tools, which I observe. And this scale up allowed us to achieve quantitative studies which tell stories. And before it was definitely a challenge. So.
Okay, so one thing that I think triggered when I was thinking, and I was listening to your story there, Ollie, about being in a car and driving, and there's a consumer and you're trying to engage with the consumer, and the consumer's driving, and it could potentially be an accident in 5 minutes. I mean, what do you do? How do you engage? How do you overcome those challenges? And we've all spoken about the challenges, just to get the empathy and get the connection. And how do you do it, or how did you do it?
Yeah, it's we've learned a lot, I'd say. I'm talking specifically about my sort of team and about how we engage people well. And fundamentally, we can't rely on one single moment of engagement with digital. That can't. I just don't think that really gets us very much, because you're trying to replicate, a face-to-face environment with a digital environment, and there's so many things that are missing. So there's lots of little tips and tricks that you can go into. I mean, doing some sort of pre-work with people is definitely very important. Spreading the research out over a longer period of time is very important. One of the things I quite like doing is I'm an ethnographer, and one of the things is it's about understanding your participants, and it's also about giving something of yourself as well. So all of my ethnographers, when they do digital ethnography, have to send a video of themselves about what they're doing in their life if they're going to get something from their participants as well. So there's sort of a principle of reciprocity in there. And then suddenly people do start to trust you a lot more because you've given something up and they go, okay, that's quite interesting actually. I know something about you. So there's those kinds of things as well that I think are very important. Oh, and one other one as well, which has been a good trick, has been turning our participants into researchers. So don't say, tell me your answer, say go out and find the answers amongst your family and friends. Again, it's a fairly old technique of peer interviewing, but actually it works very well in a digital world because it's sort of injecting a bit of human back into it a bit more, which I think is the important part.
Nadia, what about you? How did you manage to, because it's all about bonding really, isn't it, and creating a bond through essentially what is a device or a screen, or sometimes just a voice.
Exactly.
And that's it. How did you have any difficulties, or did you have any tips to help create that bond?
Yeah, so when we started this journey ongoing on digital-only qualitative research, we were thinking about different ways on how to engage our consumers, how to inspire their participation, and we were basically observing different opportunities. But what we realized at the end, that the best tool is in our hands, so it's TikTok platform. The platform that inspires creativity and brings joy. And we see so many creative moments which are happening, sparks of this excitement, joy, participation. And we decided that's a great place and a great opportunity for us to leverage for our research. So what we decided to do is, a part of our qualitative studies, we asked our respondents to go on their TikTok profile, create TikTok videos, basically leveraging the tools and diversity of tools and opportunities which we have. Of course, it's very important to ensure data protection and full GDPR compliance. That's why we ask respondents to record videos on TikTok platform. Don't share them publicly, just download them on their phones and upload them in the qualitative platform. But what we saw is extreme boost in their participation, extreme boost in their sharing stories, sharing opinions, being creative, being open and transparent. And eventually it allowed us to collect a lot of interesting ideas and interesting insights.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And Eva, you mentioned one word, and that struck me because I think we all struggle to be creative, get creativity, inject it into our research, and engage with consumers in a creative way. And you spoke about that as being a challenge. How did you overcome that?
Well, I think it still is a challenge, and I think when I speak to the colleagues, it's still kind of thinking, are we getting as much as we think we would go to if we went and kind of saw people face to face. But I think make the most of the little things that you get unexpectedly as well, because obviously we are now having focus groups with people with their real self in a background, so their home tells a little story of themselves as well, and make the most of that and utilize that and ask them to do things. And also, we did one research, we were looking at passive versus active viewing, and nobody wanted to admit that they have TV in a background. They was like, no, we don't do that. And it was really funny because one woman was really seriously talking about that while we saw her TV in a background. So, it's clearly, you're getting certain things that maybe you wouldn't be able to get if you had them in a room and they are dressed in that mindset and with that hat of being in a group with strangers. So I think there is kind of a good side of it as well. But another thing as well, in focus group, lots of books are saying 6 is a really good number. Don't go with 7, rather let them go and pay them and just have 6 people in a group, because it gives a really good dynamic, because it gives everyone a chance to speak, no one gets left out and forgotten, and there is enough people to build kind of creative juices. But I do feel online we kind of see maybe 4 is a better number. It's really hard to build that discussion with 6 people on the screen. Everyone's kind of waiting to have their turn, and you don't pick up the body language when someone needs to say something or wants to just bounce off something, and people kind of push back on bouncing off, reacting to things. So I think of a smaller groups online, and definitely that kind of makes a big difference.
Okay, so we've looked at the challenges, we've looked at how to overcome those challenges, and some things that we've had to put in place because we've had no choice, because we've had 2 years, 1.5 years, stuck at home, still trying to do our jobs as best we can. But, you know, things are opening up, we're all here for a start. Presumably there will be things that you will take forward with you as you sort of, you know, in this, is it post-pandemic? I don't know, but it's certainly different to what it was last year. What will you do? What will you do now?
Yeah, I think I have a talk tomorrow that talks about pandemic, so apologies, I will kind of repeat a few things that I'm saying now. But I think my research is global research. And for us, the benefit of the wider locations we can go to so much faster, just impossible to ignore. So with every other kind of flip side or a negative side, we really can't ignore the benefits we get with the kind of the speed we can turn things around and the number of countries we can go to in a, you know, really effective and cost-effective way. And I think we need to see it as a hybrid way. We need to kind of try and you know, adjust and adapt to really have that benefits of the efficiency of online, but not losing the kind of what I feel slight depth and maybe kind of really digging deeper that we get when we go face to face. So I would definitely, you know, we can't just go back how it was, but I really will push not to just be online going forward.
Right, so you're opting in the future for some kind of hybridization,
Yeah.
a bit of both.
And I have to say, you know, if it was only 6 months we had to do it, probably I would just go back into the old ways. But because we've done it for so long, we have to stop and admit what's benefit and, you know, so to kind of find that balance. We need to be fair and look at the good sides as well. I know we all love to travel, but there are other things there as well.
And Nadia, what about you? I mean, you were able to optimize, I think, fortunately, because you already had a platform, TikTok, which you could leverage and use that as a bonding tool. But would you go for that hybridization method as well?
Yeah, I fully agree with Eva. We learned so much from this opportunity to conduct qualitative research digitally. And I think it's been a great learning curve for us, so we saw its strengths and opportunities. So I'm really looking forward for 2022, where we'll be able to blend both online qualitative with more traditional ways of doing things. I think, as I mentioned, the most important one, which stays like as an opportunity for us right now, is understanding things in the context and blending these digital tools, scaling up with the in-depth insights which we're gathering as researchers, as we grew as professionals. I think this is a great opportunity for us to basically unpin the most interesting insights and to get very important and impactful learnings.
And Ollie, what about you? Is it going to be full steam ahead, research at the driving wheel, or is it going to be a mix of what you had before and, you know, some of that investigative, the researcher, the consumer becomes the researcher, doing a bit more, I don't know, of the pre-research before you actually meet the consumer? Are you going to be mixing all of that?
There's definitely going to be a mix. We were kind of, there was some forced innovation that happened because of lockdown, right? So there were some things that we just had to find new ways of doing. Some have worked quite well. You know, doing a lot of pre-work, bringing academics in was something we started to do a lot more all of a sudden. All of these things, that forced innovation was very, very helpful, but there are some things that we're still missing. And fundamentally, and the AQR will come out with some guidance soon on qualitative mixed methodologies and what we've learned from the pandemic. But just a sort of a little teaser in advance, I think one of the things that we've seen is that it all fundamentally it depends on the objectives. So which objectives are you trying to answer and how are you going to answer them? Most of the time there will probably be a mixed method approach of face-to-face and digital. And just to sort of sum it up nicely, I think that the face-to-face side of things gives us surprises. It gives us things we weren't expecting. It gets us out of our bubble. Everyone's talking about empathy. You can only really get empathy in an effective way through face-to-face. It also means that, you know, us as researchers, our own biases get stripped away very, very quickly because the participants take the lead rather than us. And in a digital world, we tend to take the lead because we ask fairly direct questions, and you know, the level of trust and engagement is low. But you can get secrets in the digital world. And I think that the confessional side of someone with their phone actually has been slightly underplayed previously, and I think is actually a fantastic tool. So for me, as we move into this sort of mixed method, hybrid world, it's sort of, it's are you after surprises or are you after secrets? And I think if you can get both of those on a project, you've got wonderful insight.
That's really interesting. So I think we've sort of covered the three main topics that we wanted to talk about today, but you may well have some questions that you want to address to our panel.
Can I ask a question?
I think.
Can I? Can I touch it? Okay. Hi, Max Schori from Swedish Moderators. We have worked with AQR, been on your interesting seminars previous years, and also worked within the business you work with, Eva, and the other companies. And the question in these new times when we have been trying to adapt to a disruptive market, new tools, young generation, lifestyle changes, and wondering what is the Maslow basics and what are the new things. The main one question I have is, maybe it's a bit difficult, but how do you think about the cultural within a company, the cultural within a brand, when you try to find a good synergy with the company working with the brand? I mean, for Netflix, maybe they have this culture, maybe Warner Brother, HBO has this culture. That question is quite interesting. How also what methodology you choose depends a bit on the company culture, what life stage they are in, and those aspects. And a little bit about, that's a more general question.
So, I mean, from my point of view, and I'll be really curious to hear what you guys think, but I work for several very different companies. When you say, you know, BBC, where is ad-free and kind of public and public service, and then Virgin, and then Disney and HBO, and very, very different, all obviously media and entertainment in that sense, but in terms of the cultures, quite different. I don't know, and maybe there is, but I don't know if I approached it any differently when I did the research. Ultimately, I'm there to represent the consumer and really want to be as neutral as possible to say what they need. But obviously, the way maybe how I present the output will be defined by the stakeholders I need to speak to, where I know they need to be persuaded a little bit more. I think obviously for BBC we had to go much wider to speak to as many kind of people as possible, because it's about being fair and being kind of approaching a wider audience. But in general, I don't know if I changed how I approach the research. It's more about what question I have that I need to deliver than what's the culture in the company. So I don't know.
I've got a couple of comments on one from a sort of insight and consumer's perspective on cultural insight. I mean, one of the things that I have to admit, in the past, I feel like I've been very lazy in my research, because as an ethnographer, right, you can kind of just, you have to prepare, you have to think, you have to be very, very thorough, but you can kind of turn up in a market, you can kind of turn up and be with people and spend lots of time with people, and that does become your data. And I've had to work so much harder before I do any projects now in a digital world, and I'm consulting academics a lot more about, and that's fundamentally to try and understand that idea of cultural insight. Then the use of video, self-filming, those kinds of things is all very different in different markets. People don't want to show you certain things, they will show you other things. So I've had to work very, very hard to try and map that before. On the organisational cultural side, it's been very interesting, because that's the kind of dissemination and alignment within an organisation. And I go to some clients that I work with who you can have a webinar and suddenly everyone's like banging on the chat and everyone's talking to each other on the chat whilst and they're building ideas as they go, and that's kind of wonderful. And then you go into other organisations and they're waiting for the most important person to speak, and that person is holding back until they've got the perfect thought, and then basically you come out of that webinar with one idea. So the workshop element and the embedding element has been it's sort of been exacerbated online, I think, because whilst you do a workshop face to face, you can kind of chat to someone in the corner and have a little side conversation. Those side conversations don't seem to happen nearly so much online, and you can organise the right people in the right groups online and things like that, but it still doesn't seem to happen. And I fear for those people who are basically not the extrovert types in an online world. I see it in my team. There are some people who just disappear on Teams. They just don't talk, and that's troubling, and I don't know how to overcome that one.
Yeah, for me it's the same. I think the question is not about research per se, rather than about the differences in the activation of this research. So when you want to drive the business decision making on how you approach different stakeholders, how you approach the decision making process, making your insights really impactful. So I think this is another soft skill and which we had to develop and embrace in this period. So, and again, I think it helped a lot us to connect with diverse stakeholders, to bring different voices, and to see how it can drive the decision-making process within the organization.
I think, sorry, just one final point. I think one interesting thing that we didn't really look at, but I found it quite interesting in terms of bringing different cultures together. When we did work remotely, we were able to bring East Coast and West Coast US in to one room to talk to them, and that's the US, but even across Europe, because of the time zone, language permitting, we could do that, and that actually gave us some insight which we never really had before, because we would always go country specific, and this gave us the opportunity to say, well, the French person and the Belgian person are actually having a really interesting conversation together, and they're bonding by the fact that they're living something which is COVID and pandemic and lockdown, and that's actually creating a bond which we wouldn't really have seen before, and it's sort of straddling this cultural divide. And so I think that's also something in terms of hybridization and going forward that we will probably take on, because it's really nice to see different consumers within different countries actually having a really insightful conversation.
Or even within the same country and different cities, because we've done that, and that really is so insightful.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dimitri from Signify. My question is, based on what you have said so far, and also presenters before you, is that the hybrid methods or digital methods are actually bring a lot of positive and actually the good change. So my question to you is why we needed the pandemic to realize that?
Who wants to start with that?
I think we all said it's harder still, It was hard to get there, and also people were forced, not because of research, people were forced to get digitized so much that it was okay for us to just jump. We wouldn't have been able to do that just because we all gathered here and said, guys, let's just go online, everyone, and then everyone goes. It really was because of schooling, because of work, people had to be digitized and be comfortable having those calls face to face. But, it is harder, and it will be harder.
I think we're here to look at the positives as well. Right? I don't think we're here to say that the last year and a half's worth of work is absolute. Is it like we're here to kind of like figure out what the lessons are that we can learn from it? The one thing that the pandemic did is it made us understand what humanity means, right? Humanity is this new buzzword that everyone drops into a conversation, whether it's a politician or researcher or whatever. And it's the same thing in research. Right? We read someone with all our senses, and if you put a screen in between, you can't. So we might come back in 2 years going, it's amazing what face-to-face has done. Yeah. So I think that we can learn, and it forced us to innovate in every single industry, and it has sped certain things up. But let's be frank, we've lost things at the same time as well.
Yeah, I think it's not about just individual change, it's about the overall society change, and that eventually allowed us to see this accelerated progress and accelerated movement.
Yeah, just one final thing from my part. I think if COVID did something in every sector, not just research, but whether it's shopping and certain behaviour, it just accelerated so many things, and changed the way we do things in all sectors, not just research. And maybe research would have been heading there anyway, to a hybrid kind of more digitalisation, but different platforms. It just we were just forced to get there quicker, but we probably would have got there anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm interested whether you go as soon as you can fully offline again, or are there any questions or target groups to stick with online research?
So I think what really has helped is the online having kind of really can reach as wide as you can, is you can reach to niche people, like what you were saying. What's really interesting for us is to pick really niche audience and bring them in a room together, which is really impossible to do. Well, not impossible, but really difficult and expensive to do face to face. So there are certain things that definitely we feel that we are benefiting and we would not be able to do if it isn't online. Are we kind of gagging to go and do face-to-face research? Absolutely, we're all really, really keen to do that. But a year and a half ago, I wouldn't have thought that I would say that. But I do see strongly the benefits of online, and I definitely would immediately only go, the hybrid way and not just, run with face-to-face.
For me, it kind of comes down to the objectives again. It's like, what are you trying to find out? We've just done a fantastic study on obesity. And we did that all online. We did it just, digital ethnography, whereby we just have one participant concentrating on one researcher and just sending that back and forward. And we got so many secrets then that we wouldn't have got if we'd gone and met them because of the social awkwardness of having to deal with obesity stigma. And we got much further with that project because it was a digital project. Equally, we've just done a piece of research on sustainability in preparation for COP, and we had to do that face-to-face because that was about behaviour change. We had to go in home and try and figure out what the behaviour change opportunities were around sustainability, right? And pretty much everything you do day to day has a sustainable implication. So you have to go and explore. So it comes back to that idea of on obesity we were getting secrets. When it came to behaviour change on sustainability, that was all about surprises, and that's where it will go for me in the future.
This is a question about sample size. Do you find going online, going digital, that your sample sizes have quadrupled qualitatively?
Personally, no, thankfully. But I still...
You can do a lot more,
yeah,
right? An awful lot more. And you can probably do niches that before you wouldn't have bothered with or you couldn't have really accessed. Is that not one benefit?
It's a finite of time we have as well to do research. I mean, from my point of view, I don't go more, but I can go more countries. So instead of just going, US and maybe one more, I can do 4 for the same number of groups, but I reduce the groups in each country. And that would have logistically been really difficult and expensive to do before. So from my point of view, I don't think you need to speak to, like in UX, you need to speak to 5 people. It's not necessary to speak to 25 or, so from my point of view, I think if there is any research where you wished you could go to more, you can easily go to more. But for me, it's going into the broader number of countries.
Yeah, basically an opportunity of bringing the diverse voices in your research, listening to diverse opinions, and then combining all these voices together. I think this is the main benefit, at least from my perspective.
Hey, thank you all so much for the discussion. Just wondering about the tools that you're using currently or experimented with, and which have been the most effective for you to moderate online focus groups. That would be very interesting. Thanks.
I don't have huge amounts of experience on tools because I use one, which is an Ipsos tool. So, and by the way, I wouldn't necessarily advocate that one either. But there are some really good ones out there. But then there's also tools for that I do enjoy, like Mural and Miro and things like that, which are much more kind of collaborative and great for analysis and sharing and workshops and those kinds of things.
Personally, I know in my team we use, and I can find out what it is and let you know later, a really amazing tool in terms of doing ideation and co-creation, where basically there is a lot of kind of discussion, and then there is interviews, and you know, you can kind of log in and do all of those things in the same platform. And it allows people who are from different time zones or have different, different timetable or whatever, log in and continue the conversation. And I think that was one of the interesting things around being creative and actually rethinking how we do things. So we did co-creations really focused, 4 hours once, everyone in a room, let's build the ideas. And now we actually benefiting from the fact we let them stew and bring those ideas further and then have 1 hour discussion at the end, but let them kind of continue that conversation throughout the week. And there is a great tool, I'll find out, and I don't know if there is some kind of board that we can kind of let that information, or I can speak to you later, but it's really good.
Yeah, for me it's more a combination of different tools than one specific tool. So when we are more flexible in terms of giving some homework for our respondents, then as I mentioned, asking them to create some videos. Sometimes it's more of the community conversation, so it all depends on the specific objectives. But what is the most important for me as a researcher is to ensure that we have a diversity of experiences to engage consumers in to participate.
I would say, sorry, one last thing. We do, on the AQR, we ran like 3 or 4 days of platform roadshows, and those where all the platforms came in, and the webinars are all up on the AQR website. So you can see what each platform offers and what they think. So, yeah.
I think also it was a struggle for us to get the tools. We didn't quite know what to do, and we went to the standard ones, and the standard ones didn't always work. And so, by finding out which tools to use, we sort of went through a big learning curve to find out which ones were there. But I think ultimately we came away with one thing, and I think that's something that you alluded to, Ollie, and that was, don't let the tools override why you're there in the first place, which is to get the insight from the consumer, because sometimes you can spend so much time, looking at all these buzzy tools that are out there that actually you forget the point of the research. And I think that was one of the things that we came out with as well in terms of a learning, was that, don't let the tool kind of, overshadow what you want to do. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.